Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Friday, everybody. I trust you've had a good week. It is good to be back after a couple of days off. It was very restful. Thank you, everybody, for the understanding and patience. China has been on holiday this week, so there hasn't been that much to cover at any rate, but there are several developments that we do need to look at. Today's episode will be very much focused on the economy. Let's jump in. We begin with a very candid special report from Chinese financial media outlet Caixin about the very unbalanced growth in the Chinese economy at the provincial level. This is an often ignored factor behind increasing debt-fueled GDP statistics in China, a silent growing crisis of sorts. Wealth, income, and debt-to-GDP disparities between north and south and coast and interior regions have all become much more acute over the past decade or so, an economic process boiling into a serious political problem for Beijing. According to the Caixin report, more than half of the Chinese mainland's 31 provincial-level regions missed their GDP growth targets last year. Quote, dragged down by lower prices, a protracted property market slump, and mounting local government debt crisis, end quote. Last year, the top 5 economic powerhouses were Guangdong, Jiangsu, Shandong, Zhejiang, and Sichuan provinces, which contributed 40% of the country's overall total GDP. Nominal GDP growth reached 5.1% in eastern provinces, while the west was close behind with 4.6% and the northeast 3.7%. These all outpaced the country's central region, where GDP growth came in at 3.3%. These slower regions also reflected higher levels of public debt to reach their growth rates. The dynamism and health of the regions was also varied. The Caixin report explains that developed eastern coastal provinces saw a robust rebound in the industrial and services sectors, along with a resurgence in offline consumption. Provincial-level regions in central China, however, quote, were mired in a prolonged real estate meltdown that dragged on overall investment and consumption, end quote. Western China, meanwhile, quote, benefited from its thriving energy industry, although some provincial-level regions, embroiled in local government debt restructuring, saw lackluster investment, which weighed on their overall growth, end quote. The PPI, Producer Price Index, in resource-rich provinces such as Shanxi and Shanxi, as well as Inner Mongolia, Ningxia and Xinjiang, all fell by more than 5% year-on-year amid a significant drop in energy and chemical product prices. In the southwest, provincial-level regions such as Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi, quote, saw economic growth hampered by an escalating local government debt crisis and weak real estate investment, end quote. Of course, the elephant in the room everywhere was property. In a disparity which shouldn't be surprising to regular viewers, regional data show that property sales in central, northeastern, eastern, and western regions fell 11.2%, 7.7%, 5.8%, and 3.7% by value, respectively. Quote, with the central region experiencing particularly acute challenges, end quote. Pain from export declines was also unevenly spread. Exports in dollar terms declined in eastern, central, and western China by 4.1%, 9.8%, and 4.8% respectively, compared with 2022. The northeast saw 0.9% growth, but this was from a low base. With all this in mind, it's not surprising to see Chinese financial media outlet Yicai writing this week that Chinese local governments are pivoting from a reliance on property investment to developing hubs for cutting-edge industries. Quote, after more than half of the Chinese mainland's provincial-level regions missed their GDP targets for 2023. Given the continuing real estate malaise, many provincial-level regions have shifted their focus to building a modernized industrial system, including establishing hubs for cutting-edge industries and intensifying scientific research efforts, end quote. Some commentators are skeptical of the move, however. Peking University Professor of Finance Michael Pettis expressed on the news, quote, most provinces in China seem to have the same strategy for dealing with property slowdown, that is to pour resources into industrialization. This might have made sense if these areas had been starved of capital and eager for support, but that's pretty unlikely, end quote. Next up, this week saw the publication of consultancy Bain & Co. Inc.'s latest report about China's luxury market, a market which acts as an excellent proxy for demand from China's politically powerful and economically significant urban middle class. The report findings are a mixed bag. While 2023 saw a modest pickup year-on-year, growing 12%, China's luxury market last year failed to recover to 2021 levels. The report expressed, quote, "Solid double-digit rebound is commendable, but China's luxury market has not fully recovered to its 2021 levels. The recovery was tempered by the challenging economic climate and increased overseas shopping." End quote. Adding, quote, "As the market transitions to a post-COVID growth phase, uncertainties remain regarding the speed at which consumer confidence will resume and how overseas luxury shopping will evolve." End quote. Performances were varied over different industries. In 2023, French luxury design house Houze saw strong China revenue growth. Louis Vuitton and Dior also saw modest gains, both expanding in China's biggest cities and doubling down on the China market. However, as Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post writes this week, quote, "Smaller brands, which are highly dependent on middle-class spending, such as Michael Kors, were hit particularly hard during the pandemic. They are increasingly looking beyond top-tier Chinese cities and are relying on online tools such as live streaming and e-commerce as they seek new growth." End quote. Next up, we look at what the first half of 2024 could see for China's economy. But just quickly, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, it's a huge help if you hit that like button and subscribe. It's just me making these episodes, but your support is a huge source of motivation, and this is the primary way in which the channel can grow. And for those who want to go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable, it relies primarily on subscriber support. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, and finally for today's video, Houze, a fellow at Marco Polo and a well-respected voice on China's economy, published his forecast and views on what to expect from the economy in the first half of 2024. It's worth examining some of the salient points made in the piece, which we are now quoting selected excerpts from directly. Key takeaways. 1. In March, Beijing is expected to set a lower growth rate of 4.5% for 2024, signaling a more challenging environment and managing expectations around growth. 2. That's because all key drivers of growth, investment, consumption, and exports face even more daunting challenges in the first half of 2024. In particular, the unraveling of the local debt crisis will put more downward pressure on growth. 3. But like in 2023, the Chinese government won't be trigger-happy with stimulus anytime soon, instead riding out the bumps until it believes it must put a floor on growth. 4. As such, 2024 growth will likely be U-shaped, with the first half of 2024 weaker than the second half when the chance for stimulus rises. It appears that Beijing is cognizant of a tough year ahead, despite its public rhetoric to the contrary, and will look to manage expectations on growth by setting a lower target of 4.5% at the March National People's Congress. Such a target also implies Beijing isn't likely to deviate much from the playbook it adopted in 2023, withhold stimulus until it believes growth might crater far below the target. And now we skip forward through the report to a part which ties things back to the beginning of today's video, with the report observing, "The property hard landing, drawn out as it is, will of course affect private investment. But what's more concerning is the unraveling of the local debt problem that will affect investment even more. Beijing's financial support in 2023 may have stabilized local government finances for a while, but the reprieve is likely temporary as local debt will once again deteriorate in the first half of this year. This is because Beijing remains hawkish on deleveraging and continues to put local governments between a rock and a hard place. At the one end, Beijing still insists that local governments pay the interest on their debt, even if it has allowed a temporary delay on paying the principal. On the other hand, Beijing won't allow local governments to borrow more to pay back the debt, because that would of course raise the leverage. These mandates hardly give local governments any breathing room because their fiscal conditions are so bad that they cannot meet their interest payment obligations. If the borrowing rule is strictly implemented, that will lead to an annual 2 trillion yuan, 416 billion US dollars, cash shortfall for local governments, based on our estimates. That means local governments will have to cut their spending. Okay, here ends the direct quote and today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Friday, and I will see you all tomorrow.